but it is a joy to be with you, and it's a joy to serve you. I'm an elder at Jubilee Church, Liverpool. We've been preaching a series called God's Upside Down Kingdom on Matthew 5 to 7. And this is a sermon that I gave there on anger, actually. But anger is like almost a random issue. Of course, nothing is ever random. And God has brought me here today to talk to you about anger. But Jesus taught on all kinds of practical life issues. One of these was anger. The American writer Ambrose Bierce said, "Speak when you are angry, and you will make the best speech you will ever regret." Noel Gallagher said of his brother and fellow Oasis band member Liam, "He's the angriest man you'll ever meet. He's like a man with a fork in a world of soup." And in 2010, an airline passenger scooped £8,765 on a Ryanair scratch card. When he asked for his money, the crew said they couldn't pay up immediately because they didn't have the cash kicking around the aircraft, and the win had to be verified. The passenger was so angry, he ate and swallowed the card, invalidating his claim. So we know that anger can be bad for ourselves, but Jesus actually says something stronger than that. He says that when we're angry, we're committing murder in our heart. And that immediately sounds tough, doesn't it? And hard to live up to. How can we meet God's standards? And to understand this, I'd like to take us back to how Jesus started this, his first recorded sermon in Matthew. And so I'd like to start from the beginning and read all the way through to where he teaches about anger. So it's about the first 2/3 of chapter 5. Now, I enjoy reading the Bible. And when you're a preacher, you can always be confident you get one thing right if you read the Bible, because that's definitely spot on. So let's just feel free to relax and let it soak in for you as I read it for you from the beginning of Matthew. So it starts, "Now when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up on a mountainside and sat down. His disciples came to him and he began to teach them. He said, 'Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called children of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted because of righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people insult you, persecute you, and falsely say all kinds of evil against you because of me. Rejoice and be glad, because great is your reward in heaven. For in the same way they persecuted the prophets who were before you.'" Now Jesus tells us why this teaching matters. So he says, "You are the salt of the earth. But if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is no longer good for anything except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven. And again, for another reason, why does his teaching matter? Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. Therefore, anyone who sets aside one of the least of these commands and teaches others accordingly will be called least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices and teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven. And then, after all of that, he gets to his first practical example, which is anger. You have heard that it was said to the people long ago, you shall not murder, and anyone who murders will be subject to judgment. But I tell you that anyone who is angry with a brother or sister will be subject to judgment. Again, anyone who says to a brother or sister, raka, a term of contempt, is answerable to the court. And anyone who says, you fool, will be in danger of the fire of hell. Therefore, if you are offering your gift at the altar and there remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there in front of the altar. First go and be reconciled to them. Then come and offer your gift. Settle matters quickly with your adversary who is taking you to court. Do it while you are still together on the way, or your adversary may hand you over to the judge, and the judge may hand you over to the officer, and you may be thrown into prison. Truly, I tell you, you will not get out until you have paid the last penny. So that is our big scope to help us address one particular issue, or actually a whole load of issues. So I'll get to that. So I want to go back to we call them Beatitudes, the blessed. The blessed are you. Blessed are. Blessed means I'm in a really great position if. So I'm all is good. It's good if. That's what blessed means. Now, there's these 8 blessings and consequences, quite a lot to get our head around. So I want us to have a go saying them together, just to help us kind of go through them. This is what we're going to spend over half our time just focusing on these 8 things. So instead of saying blessed, it's good for us. So that means we want it, Jesus is saying, or we should want it if we're wise. But it actually puts us in a group of people. So he says blessed, it talks about those, and the you is plural. So strictly we're saying, I wish I was one of those who are. But that's a bit of a mouthful. So we will just say, I wish I was. But remember that you're joining, if you are these things, you're joining a bunch of people. It's not just you. So we're going to say, I would say together, I wish I was poor in spirit because ours is the kingdom of heaven all the way through. Okay? And we're going to say that together. You all up for that? Yeah? Okay. So all together. I wish I was poor in spirit because ours is the kingdom of heaven. I wish I was mourning because we will be comforted. I wish I was meek because we will inherit the earth. I wish I was hungering and thirsting for righteousness because we will be filled with righteousness. I wish I was merciful because we will be shown mercy. I wish I was pure in heart because we will see God. I wish I was a peacemaker because we will be called children of God. I wish I was persecuted because of righteousness, because ours is the kingdom of heaven. Now, how did that feel? Were some of those things hard to say with conviction? Yeah. But we've got here a group of characteristics and a group of consequences that make us part of an astonishing set of people. Let's first look at the consequences, and I'm going to spend a lot more time looking at the characteristics. They're bookended by the kingdom of heaven, and so they're a group. That's part of what that bookending tells you. They're a group together to be considered together. And it's a group of people, so actually it's the set. So it's the set of characteristics and the set of blessings. So if we reorder them slightly into our kind of more logical way we think about this more often, it says that the blessings are that we will see God, we will be comforted, we will obtain mercy, we will be filled with righteousness, we will be called children of God, inherit the earth, and gain the kingdom of heaven, eternal life. Does that sound familiar? Yeah? So to Christians, these promises are very familiar. And actually, God's amazing good news for us is at the very beginning of the first sermon of Jesus in the first book of the New Testament. It's the first thing he says. But what does Jesus tell us that it takes for us to receive these promises? Now I find this tough going. I found this tough going. First of all, it helped me to memorize these characteristics, to even start getting my head around them. And they're really in two groups. You've got the first four, which are to do with how we relate to God, and you've got the second four about how we relate to other people. But for years and years and years, you hear this passage over and over again. I associate it with the Anglican Church, with kind of even teaching kind of outside mainstream Christianity that you maybe hear in primary school or something. But I never got it. Before I was a Christian, I never got it. And even as a Christian, I found it hard. So this is what I can hear, or I heard, when I read this passage, when I read these characteristics. Instead of blessed, super holy are the losers, those who are overwhelmed by death, the pathetic, those who are never satisfied, those who turn a blind eye to wrongdoing, those who are too holy to be real, those who are blind to evil, and those who have a horrible life. So to understand these blessings, I had to turn my thinking upside down, God's upside down kingdom. So I'm going to go through each one of them. Why did I think poor in spirit meant loser? Because I was arrogant. So poor in spirit means those who know what they lack, the lowly. It's actually, you face that challenge when you come into a church and everyone says, it's really good to have Mark here today. And you think, yeah, you're right. They're really lucky. No, I mean, you have to fight that. I have to fight that because that is arrogance in me. There is. And actually, knowing what I lack and knowing that this is God and I'm a servant of God and actually I'm nothing without him, knowing that I lack what I lack, knowing the lowly, that poverty turns to advantage when it fosters humility before God. So we need to acknowledge to God our spiritual bankruptcy, our unworthiness, and our utter dependence on him. To get to God, I have to know that I need him. So blessed are the poor in spirit. Now, why did I think mourning meant overwhelmed by death? That's kind of obvious. You know, no one wants to be people they love to be dead. But I was oblivious and clung to an illusion of comfort. And actually, this mourning, it doesn't just mean you know people who are dead. It's more about feeling the pain of all that is not right. So we look at the world, we look at what's going on in the world, we look at ourselves, and we mourn. We're sorry for our part. We're weeping for sin and its results, with death being the ultimate consequence. So we're mourning death and its cause all around us, including in ourselves. I have to acknowledge things are wrong before I can play my part in making anything better, including how I stand with God, including how I stand with anyone else. I won't do anything unless I care. So I'm blessed when I mourn. Why did I think meek meant pathetic? Well, for me personally, it's because I was domineering. So meek is those who know their place before God, who are gentle and are self-controlled, who are free from malice and a vengeful spirit. And again, acknowledging to other people as well as to God our bankruptcy and loss. My work, I'm actually a nuclear safety inspector, which always impresses me. I think that's pretty good. So I go around, and sometimes I'm inspecting power stations and particular arrangements. And I was in this particular situation where there was a control room operator, and he looked like he was in trouble. He looked terrified from the start when I came over and talked to him. And I really wanted him to do well. I always want people to do well. And I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, he's not looking like he's going to do very well. And sadly for him, he didn't do very well. He didn't know something that he needed to know and he should know as part of his role as a control room operator. And I was really concerned that I was not being a dominating, super scary nuclear safety inspector. And I went back to my colleagues and I was discussing it with them, and did I do it well? And because they kind of backed off so it wasn't too intimidating for him. And one of them said, well, it is you, Mark. And I'm thinking, yeah, that's the problem. And then they say, but he's meant it like, and of course, you're not domineering. And I'm like, are you joking or are you serious? And he seemed to genuinely think that I was a friendly, approachable guy. And I thought, wow, there must be something good happening in me here. Another time we're having a discussion while we're playing a game, and someone else kind of joked in a sarcastic way about, and of course you're really hard to get on with and a kind of tough person. And they were joking, like as if they were saying, of course you're not. And I was like, is that what you're saying? And another friend who knows me really well was kind of just staying silent. I think that's because he knew me a bit better, and he knew sometimes I can be a bit like that. But it's at least reassuring that God is working in my life, that in some ways I am meek because I'm following Jesus' example. So I'm blessed when I'm meek. I'm nothing before God. I don't make conditions. I accept his wisdom and authority rather than my own. Why did I think hungering and thirsting for righteousness meant never satisfied? Because I was self-sufficient. So anyone who is hungering and thirsting for righteousness means they know the value of what is necessary for full life. So I cannot make things right, but there is someone who can make me right. And I long for him to change me. I'm so amazed and grateful that in Jesus, he's accepted me as right already. And I long for the day when he will make all things right. Hungering and thirsting for righteousness. And why did I think merciful meant turning a blind eye to wrongdoing? Because I was judgmental. Being merciful means finding a way of justice that expresses love and compassion, like Jesus did through Jesus. So we can forgive the guilty knowing that we're the same, that we're guilty. And we have compassion for the suffering and needy because we know that we're the same. So it's really helpful to be aware, and for me to be aware, I have no rights. If I want to hold on to rights, my right is death. That's the consequence of my sin. I have no rights. I deserve death. But because of Jesus, because of God's mercy, because of what Jesus did for me, dying on the cross for my sin, that to understand, I need to be poor in spirit. I need to mourn the loss. I need to be meek in coming before him. And I need to hunger and thirst for that righteousness that he can give me. I can then take hold of that promise of what he's done for me, completely, utterly undeserved. Blessed are the merciful. Now, why did I think pure in heart meant too holy to be real? Because any good parts of my character were weak and changeable depending on my circumstances. So pure in heart means driven by an inner conviction and a desire to walk the right way, a moral purity, a clarity of spiritual vision, and single-mindedness of purpose. Now, only God is morally pure. But in practice, what this is talking about is a pattern of thinking and habitual behavior by God's grace and strength. Now, this can work out in all kinds of areas of our life. So one for me is, do I value being truthful over avoiding getting into trouble? And when I was a child, I was a compulsive liar. I did it all the time. It was a habit for me, and I wanted to be good at it. So one time in primary school, we were all collecting these stickers, these football stickers. You still have them. So you collect the whole team, or all the teams in the what was the first division then, and you stick them in a book. And I support Manchester United, and so that was particularly, you wanted to get all of Manchester United. And there was a boy in our school who got a sticker of a Manchester United player, I can't remember which one, who none of us had, and he had it, and he was really chuffed, and he was showing it off. And he put it in his desk, and I think he told us he'd put it in his desk, or maybe he did it in front of us. And I stole it. And he said, someone's stolen my sticker. And for some reason, I really don't know why, everyone thought it was me. And we had a good class teacher, and so she arranged a trial. And so I was put on trial. Did Mark steal this sticker? And who else could have stolen it? Where was Mark at the time? Where was anyone else? And they had this kind of, the evidence, and I thought I did pretty well. I didn't admit to it, and I was pretty cool throughout, and I thought some good diversionary tactics, and I was even gave a bit of honesty in there to kind of confuse the opposition, And then there wasn't a verdict. We left it at that. And then we were walking on to the next thing, and two of my friends were walking in front of me, and one of them said to the other, "Oh, it's obvious Mark was guilty, wasn't it?" And the other one said, "Careful, he's right behind you." And I thought, why? Why was it obvious? And I really don't know, except maybe they knew me, because I did take it. And it was no use to me. I did stick it in the book, but then I couldn't show my book off anymore because they'd have known where I got the sticker from. So it was a bad idea all round. But I'll give you another example. So I'm now in fourth year, year 9, is it, at school. 10, is it? 10, okay, year 10 at school, and we're in a French class, and I really, really hate French, hate it, hated the class. So I hated everything to do with it, hated the teacher, just because she was my French teacher, and just hated the whole thing. And so to just express this, and something to do to get through the sheer pain and boredom of it, I'm writing upside down. No, not the French. No, just the language. I just don't like learning the language. I wrote upside down in this desk some abuse of the French teacher. I can't remember exactly what it was, but Mrs. So-and-so is something abusive. Just out of interest, that I could do this, write this upside down on this desk. And then with a pen or a pen, I think it was a pencil. And then a few months later, still the same year, she said, at the beginning of her lesson, she said, we were cleaning the desk the other day, she said, and on one of the desks, there was written something about me that was really quite hurtful. Now, we all sat in the same places at every lesson. So she knew it was my desk. She didn't say that, but she knew it's my desk. But lots of different classes all used the same classroom. So I knew she didn't know it was me, but I knew she was testing to see whether it was. Now, I'd have years of practice by then, and I was as cool as a cucumber, looked slightly surprised, slightly sympathetic. And she said, I think probably it wasn't anyone in this class. I thought, yeah, done it. I can lie well. Now, if I met her now, I would say to her, look, I'm sorry, it was me. It wasn't you. I didn't write that because I just hated French. I'm sorry. I'm never going to be able to do that. Maybe I'll see her in heaven and I can. But when I became a Christian, that was something that switched in me. I just immediately wanted to be a man of integrity. And actually, by God's grace, that did just change. And I would take pride in the fact, joy in the fact that I would admit something that was true, even though it was bad for me at the time, because it was like a sign that God had won me and changed me. But more recently, I'm thinking, am I actually like that 100% integrity? So you're playing a game and you play a card and you realize later you shouldn't have played that card, and there's still some time to take it back. Do I take it back? I don't say, oh, well, I didn't know at the time. I'll just carry on. It's a constant battle. And actually, while we were worshiping, God reminded me of another battle, which was with pornography. So before I became a Christian when I was 17, and before then, we'd been with friends to the house of someone who just had pornography everywhere. And they said, oh, it's fine, you can take some. So I'd just taken it, and I had pornography in my bedroom and looked at it. And I became a Christian, and I don't know how long, soon afterwards, I thought, why have I got this? And I just threw it away and put it in the bin. I actually put it at the top of the bin, which was perhaps a bit stupid. When Mum or Dad would have come to empty the bin, they would have seen it. But anyway, there you go. I threw it away. I remember putting it there and shutting the door. And then that was it. And actually that night, suddenly bombarded with images from this pornography. I thought, wow, that really had a hold on me. But then that was it. God set me free. And it wasn't an issue for me at all. Until when I was about 21, it suddenly occurred to me that I was old enough to go and buy it for myself, and that I didn't have to, go into a friend's house. And I had to fight the battle all over again. I was stupid enough to do it, and I had to fight it all over again. And I won it through accountability and saying, if I do this, I'm going to tell someone. And that's how I won that battle. And so I won it over physical pornography. And then having, what was actually for me, it was an iPad Touch with internet access. Again, it just suddenly occurred to me, a low moment, this is just in your pocket. You only need to put in a search term and it's there. And I had to fight a battle all over again with a different leader, with different accountability. So I've had to keep fighting that battle. Now I have won that battle. I know that I'm not addicted to porn. And I demonstrate that in my life through accountability. But we all have different battles of being pure in heart. So do I avoid pornography because it's just not an option for me? Do I pause before retaliating when provoked? Does my heart go out to someone as they tell me how they're suffering? Is my first reaction to give when I see a need? All kinds of areas, and there'll be many more. That's pure in heart. Why did I think peacemaking meant being blind to evil? Well, it was because I loved confrontation and creating tension, and that is part of me. I do like confrontation. I like addressing issues. It's a good thing and it's a bad thing. It's almost like what Dave was saying. I like asking the hard question and seeing the person squirm even, to be honest, because I like seeing issues getting addressed. But the bad thing in that, of course, is that you want to be full of grace, full of gentleness, peacemaking. So a peacemaker is someone who seeks to address evil at its roots, it's too clever for me, this. Anyway, to address evil at its roots. And I suppose not with its fruit, I've written, which I guess is saying you don't just deal with the symptoms, you get into what is the real cause. And Jesus is the Prince of Peace. So he made peace between God and mankind and united people with each other. It was hugely costly to him. He died in agony and suffered God's wrath for our sake. And I need to follow Jesus' example. I need to be peacemaking. I'm blessed as I am making peace. And lastly, why did I think suffering persecution for righteousness meant having a horrible life? Again, it's a bit obvious, but it's because I considered comfort and convenience to be my right and my purpose, the purpose of my life. And actually, in following Jesus, I have found something greater and look forward to an eternity greater than I can get my head around. Now, the world finds righteousness offensive, so it will oppose me. But momentary discomfort, pain, and opposition for God's glory is an astonishingly good deal because of what follows. So Jesus is saying here, he's not promising us an easy life. And elsewhere it talks about rejoicing in opposition. And so there's something about suffering persecution for righteousness actually as God saying, yeah, you're on the right track. You're going to have the kingdom of heaven. So Jesus' teaching is so upside down. His upside down kingdom is the kingdom of heaven. And we need to live upside down. And when we live upside down, the world becomes the wrong way up. So the next passage, Matthew 5:13-16, Jesus says, walk in the world upside down. It says our identity in living out our righteousness in all the ways that I've just described is our inherent saltiness that acts against the world's decay. Don't lose sight of who you are. You don't have to be what the world would expect or mold you into. Then you cease to be effective. So people looking at you and at me say, that's funny, how can that person walk that way? How come I feel better when I turn the same way up as I talk to them? So we're God's light, his purity, his truth, his presence. We are called to be actively upside down in the world. And when we do this and let our light shine before others, they say, why can I see better by this upside down light? All my light seems to do is advance the darkness. And then in verses 17 to 20, Jesus says that he fulfills the law and the prophets since they point to him. So as the Old Testament points to Jesus, as God's whole law points to Jesus, Jesus, in fulfilling it, establishes the true direction to which it points, to him. And the way it is to be obeyed, which is in this teaching, which is in the heart. Jesus demands his righteousness. And the law truly points to that. And we've spent time looking at these basic principles that come from the heart. See, the law was always about behavior from the heart. It drives us, the law drives us to recognize that we are poor in spirit, mourning for our lack, meek in acknowledging our shortfall, and turning to God for righteousness. We're so grateful for God's mercy. We ourselves are merciful, and his power is at work in us to help us to be pure in heart, to make peace, and to be ready for persecution for his sake. This is the root of all of Jesus' teaching. Now, Jesus' sermon in the rest of Matthew 5 and 6 and 7 turn to all kinds of practical applications. Murder and anger, adultery, lust, divorce, oaths and straightforward truth, justice and grace, love for enemies, giving, prayer, fasting, money, worry, judging others, depending on God, and discerning between true and false prophets and true and false believers. All of these things work out from this behavior of our heart, rooted in these characteristics. And all of us need to think, how does this apply to me? Where do I most need these principles to affect that area of my life? See, fulfilling God's law is impossible unless our heart has been won first. So I'm just going to turn to anger as an example at the end, just very quickly. So it's interesting that Jesus comes to this sixth of the Ten Commandments about murder first. It's certainly a foundational sin that's clearly wrong. You know, we'd all agree on it, wouldn't we? Murder's wrong. Its avoidance is central to the good of society. And perhaps it's actually the one commandment that most of us would think is pretty much in our favor. Anyone arguing they are inherently good would probably bring up that they hadn't murdered anybody. But Jesus says, look what's going on in your heart. Now, there are some times when anger and murder lie obviously close together. So anger can spawn murder. You know, that can be the reason why we commit murder. But also, there can be things going on in us. So the comedian John Cleese told a US chat show in 2016 that one of his 3 ex-wives had died of cancer, and he said, it was very sad because it was the wrong one. He would like the others to die in the nicest possible way, something quick like a tree falling on them. So he said that. And my first boss in Liverpool, when I first moved to Planter Church in Liverpool with Dave and Graham, who I think has been here, so you may know him. He was my first boss. He was a real pain. I really struggled with him. We just did not think in the same way. I didn't feel like he was supportive of me. He probably thought I was a real pain in the backside. And the real problem was I didn't respect him. And unfortunately, I kind of let him know as well that I didn't respect him. So that obviously didn't help, which was my fault. But talking about this, and actually in a small group in church, talking about it, I realized that actually I'd be very happy if he died. You know, if I came into work the next day and he said, so, you know, your boss is dead, I'd be going, yes. Now, we were laughing about that, and it's kind of funny, and the thing about the wife is kind of funny, but John Cleese's wives, but actually, of course, it's not funny. It's not funny that we're actually committing. I was committing murder in my heart. I wanted him dead. Now, I wouldn't have murdered him, but my heart would have liked it. And that's a problem. And that's what Jesus is saying. He's saying that they can go together. But notice not only that Jesus extends the crime from murder to anger, but he also extends the penalty as well, from death to hell. So he's saying it's pretty serious. Now, as an aside, just in case you're thinking this, most people do at some point, there must be such a thing as righteous anger because God can be angry. Now, Martin Luther describes this as an anger of love, one that wishes no one any evil, one that is friendly to the person but is hostile to the sin. C.J. Mahaney, who preached at Bible Weeks quite a few years ago that I used to go to, I like the way he put it. He said, "There is such a thing as righteous anger, but I'm not sure I've ever experienced it." And I think that's true for me. When we're angry, when I'm angry, are we also exercising being poor in spirit, being merciful, being a peacemaker? Or is it being replaced by driving some of these away? Is there really no pride, no hatred, no malice, no desire for revenge? And when I'm angry, I'm making myself God. I'm judging, I'm labeling. That's why it talks about raca and you fool. I'm governed by my desire. I need to get what I want. I'm God. That's what I'm doing when I'm expressing anger. So am I actually poor in spirit, mourning, meek, hungering and thirsting for righteousness, merciful, pure in heart, peacemaking, and ready to accept persecution? Maybe I'm angry because of persecution. I'm not ready for it. So all of these characteristics help me and you to avoid anger. And then at the end, Jesus talks about taking immediate action for reconciliation. I just want to point out that he says, if someone has something against you, not you have something against them, which you might think is a weird way around if you're angry. But actually, there's just three key things I want to say about this. One, it's not your job to sort them out. That's God's job. It's your job to sort you out. And if your relationship is strained with someone, there's always something you can apologize for. And your anger is itself your problem. So you have got something that they have got something against you because you're angry. Now, the key to anger is forgiveness and reconciliation, which is something that actually can apply totally in ourselves. We can talk to someone, we can help them understand, they can say they're sorry, but our responsibility is to forgive anyway. And I have found that all these attitudes of the heart help me, but ultimately also forgiveness is a decision. And sometimes I can get there through these things and just forgive them because I can identify with them and realize I have no rights and I'm just as bad. But sometimes that's not enough. And I need to say to God, I choose to forgive this person. Please help me to forgive them. And I have found, my personal testimony is I've found that God has always answered that prayer. And so, for example, an example that always comes to mind in this, because it's when I first experienced it, was I was living with a couple and they argued all the time. They were a really good example of how not to live life well. I lived with this couple who just had a newborn child, and Mary, my wife, lived with another couple who just had a newborn child. And there was lots about them that I liked. But there was lots about them, like how not to live when your baby is born, versus the couple that Mary lived, who like how to live instead. So it was actually really helpful. But I did love them and still do. But she actually had a real go at me. And there's always an element of truth when someone criticizes you. But she was very hurtful, very strong, and it was because she was having a tough time. And she said some things which actually hit some real nerves for me, so where I was already delicate. And I felt really wounded and hurt and felt like she'd been really unreasonable. And I then went out. Again, it was actually to another church small group. And when I came back, she'd gone to bed. So I couldn't speak to her. All the way through, I was thinking, I'm going to have to speak to her. I'll tell you how unreasonable you've been. But she'd gone. She was in bed. And I knew it wouldn't be good for me just to sit with all this anger and bitterness. So I remember sitting at the bottom of these steep stairs in the terraced house we lived in, sitting there and saying, God, I know I have to forgive Antonia. I don't want to, but help me. And then immediately it went, and it was like I was grasping after it. It was so fast. It was like suddenly there was no anger there at all. God just took it from me. And I've always held to that as an example. Now, I know it's trivial, and I know some things are much, much tougher than that. But I have always found that God honors that prayer. So that was the specific example of anger. I'm nearly finished. Do you have the band back? Yeah. I've got an application for you all. First of all, I'd just like to give us all the chance to kind of, let's stand. Do you mind standing? Let's stand, because let's be active. Okay. So I just want us to stand before God and say, Lord, are there any of these characteristics where we need help from you? Of being poor in spirit, of mourning, of meek, hungering and thirsting for righteousness, being merciful, being pure in heart, peacemakers, and persecuted for the sake of righteousness. Lord, do you struggle in any of those areas? Because now's the chance to put it in God's hand and say, God, help me. I just want to pray over you. The Lord God, would you help us to grasp and to exhibit those things which you have said lead to us being part of your people. And Lord, wherever we are short, help us. And then also, if there's any area of your life, particularly, I guess, in terms of being pure in heart, where you've just been reminded by God that you need help, just put that into his hands right now as well. And we're just saying, Lord God, I give you this thing, and name it to him. Name it to him right now. Lord, I want to be pure in this. And as I grasp hold of who I am in you and what you've given me in return, and that your strength is sufficient to me in weakness, in my weakness, Lord, would you help me, and would you help me take the steps I need? In Jesus' name, amen. Now, I've got another practical thing. This is my wife's idea. So she says that she always loves doing rather than hearing. Now, you've been hearing quite a lot. That's it. That's over. But what I've got here in this basket is a set of luxury chocolates, okay? And they're for you, okay? There's one each for all of you, okay? And I'd like you to come and take one. But they've also, on the back, they've got a label. And on that label, I'm inviting you to write one of these characteristics that you most struggle with. So can we just, on the overheads, the projector, can you just stick the list of characteristics? Yeah, that's good stuff, yeah. So which of those do you struggle with most? So as you come forward and you take this good thing, chocolate, good thing, high quality, and you can choose, there's different flavors, I want you to write on it something that you're not too sure whether or not it's good. And it's an act of faith saying, okay, Lord, I take this thing, I take it, I accept it because I believe that the consequences for me are good. So we're going to do that all together. So just come forward, take a chocolate, the pens are there, write one of those things on it, and then take it and enjoy it as we worship. Thank you.